Hey, it's Friendo, and I'm going to throw in my belated 2 cents on the meme of religion is a mental illness. All right, so I call this a meme because I've seen this come up. It comes into fashion, then goes away, no one really talks about it, then someone will bring it up as if it's a brand new idea, something that we haven't heard before. And I think it's only a matter of time before it comes back up again. Now, I have to admit that when I first encountered this meme, it made a lot of sense to me. It had a certain personal resonance. When I left the faith, because I was raised Roman Catholic, I went through the Catholic educational system. I did not go to public school until I was a sophomore in high school. So when I left the church, I had a lot of personal misgivings. I had a lot of personal turmoil, just a lot of memes, a lot of ideas, a lot of notions about the world and how it works, how people relate to each other, how social systems relate to each other, and how reality relates to both of those things, individuals and social systems, that I just had to unlearn, that I no longer agreed with, that no longer fit into my worldview. And that's a process that's very frustrating. It's very hard to go through. It makes you a little angry. You get angry at yourself for asking yourself, how could I have been tricked into believing these things? Right? If you grew up your whole life thinking that the tooth fairy was real, and then as an adult it's explained to you the tooth fairy is not real, you kind of burn with shame over the fact that you, dummy, you just didn't get it. Everyone else knew that this wasn't the case, and you didn't get it. And so that's the experience that you have becoming an atheist as an adult. And so I can understand why people would lash out this way, because it's an expression of how you feel. It really does feel like my whole life I've been talking to crazy people, and they have been giving me their crazy. So I'll defend this notion, this idea, that far, just to the point of saying I understand why people would feel this way, and why they would need to express these feelings. Okay, now that said, it's very different to say religion is crazy and to say religion is a mental illness. We are going from something descriptive, something that is subjective, what I do or don't find to be crazy, what I do or don't find to be credible, what I am or am not personally incredulous to, into a technical terminology. And I think this has been dealt with quite well, especially by Rob. I'll link one of his videos below. When you say that something is a mental illness, you are now putting down a designation that has real-world implications. It has an actual meaning. What is a mental illness is defined by a strict protocol used by professionals that has an interest in finding, documenting, and treating mental illnesses. They are not laymen who have a political axe to grind. And I object to that very strongly. These are the kinds of tactics employed by Scientologists, for example. The people who would criticize your worldview, who don't see the world the same way you do. They need to be labeled. They need to be ostracized. You need to poison the well rather than deal with them in their actual arguments. And this is the kind of behavior that I don't tolerate, I don't respect, regardless of where it originates. It's a shitty rhetorical tactic. It is not the tactic of reason and logic and evidence. We are just making up our own standards and then taking the most academic sounding words that we can find and filling them in without understanding the rigorous process that professionals in that discipline go through in order to put down that designation, and ignoring the real world consequences that come from that designation. But really where my interest is, what I really find more fascinating is, while we can attach a protocol, we can go through a list to see what are mental illnesses and what are their symptoms, it's very hard in an academic sense to define what is a religion. Now I think for the most part, when atheists in a ostensibly Judeo-Christian culture who are familiar with various brands of Christianity, less than passably familiar with Judaism and Islam, and largely unfamiliar with any other form of religion, when they say religion is, religion does, religion has, they are really only thinking in a Judeo-Christian context. Their understanding kind of ends there. They might be more versed in beliefs and practices of types of Judaism and types of Islam, but the way in which they're using the phrase religion is incredibly unsophisticated and scholastically empty. It is really difficult to discreetly define what is a religion, what its characteristics are. Now you could say belief in the spiritual and supernatural, but that really only takes us so far. Many religions, such as Scientologists, for example, might claim to have spiritual beliefs, right? The thetan is a spirit, but they also believe that these spiritual powers can be measured in a direct physical way. You sit down with your e-meter, and your e-meter tells you what your thetan is experiencing. And Scientology focuses so much on having a process that, yeah, they do claim to be a religion, and that's kind of important now, but it's certainly not where they started off, claiming that this was the modern science of mental health. There's definitely more to the notion of religion than simply saying, well, I believe in these exterior supernatural beings. Now, what if you are Aurelian? And it's a religion, it's a religious devotion to physical, literal, extraterrestrial aliens. What if you are into New Age? You believe, pantheistically, that there is spiritual energy to the world, but the spiritual energy of a person is analogous to the spiritual energy of a rock. To say that what Christians do, praying to God or praying to saints for intervention, praying to Jesus to lift them of their sins, and what New Age spiritualists do, drinking water that's had quartz crystals sitting in it, to say that those two things are equivalent, well, there is a commonality, but there's also a lot of difference. What is it that you are actually objecting to? The believing in things that aren't real, that can't be proven, things that can't be demonstrated? Well, what about believing in truth? What about believing in justice, fairness? Are we really going to supply an argument that only the things that can be empirically demonstrated ought to be believed, and anything else is mental illness? And if we do, how are we going to avoid having a religion? The religion of scientism, the religion of empiricism, the positive statement that nothing other than what I can perceive, nothing other than what has been proven to my satisfaction can be believed. Well, what about alternate dimensions? What about dark matter, dark flow? What about any other number of physical phenomena that we have yet to discover? Yeah, there are things in the universe other than what we know, other than what we've personally experienced or personally find credible. To say that only what we know now is what is true is to develop a religious mindset in and of itself. Now, many of us have put our finger on this thing that happens, this thing in human systems. I call it extremism. Hugh James calls it ideology. The Peach calls it fundamentalism. There is this thing that we do of making categorical, objective moral claims. Oughts. We have to do this. We have to do that. We can't do this. We must not do that. And then attempting to enforce those on other people. Now, that is a problem. And that is a problem that you can find inherent in most religions. It's very attractive in a religion where you are telling people what's right and what's wrong. To take it a step further and tell them what they can and cannot do, what they must and must not do. Backing that up, particularly with the power of the state. Establishing a religion and making laws in order to force people into a value of faith position. As a secularist, that is something that I oppose. And as secularists, that's something that many religious people oppose. Making a statement that anyone who subscribes to a traditional religion has a mental illness is at least a step in that particular direction. We're going to have arguments regarding the existence or non-existence of God, reasons to subscribe or not subscribe to religions. Let's make those arguments out of actual logic and fact. Read theology, read history, read philosophy, learn what the arguments are and how to counter them. Don't do it through cheaply trying to poison the well and other rhetorical tricks. So we have to acknowledge this particular trait, taking things to extreme, arbitrary moralism, categorical moralism. While it certainly makes religion dangerous, it can make any other social institution dangerous as well, whether it is at the level of a state or if it is at the level of a local club. That is what I see in this meme, that religion is a mental illness. Attempting to carry through this categorical moralization. And I have nothing but contempt for that particular tactic.